All right. Yeah, I'll get to introduce myself properly, but this is my topic for today. And someone told me that it sounds rather more like a horror story. Yes, it can be sometimes. So my name is Morgane Peng. I work at Société Générale, so it's a French financial group in the corporate and investment banking division. And I also act as the UK AI officer. And for the past 15 years, this is me going around teams saying, hey, have you heard about the product trio? You know, this amazing thing that, if you apply it, any successful digital product should be, successful because business, engineering, and design works together and everyone's happy. Yeah. And to just give a bit of context where I work in a large, established, mature organization. My company is 160 years old and plus, so it's definitely not digital native. It's not even AI native, but we've done a lot of things. I heard that we financed the Eiffel Tower. So that's one thing, not for real. But yeah, so the product trio and all this, like people were not familiar about it. So yeah, this is me 15 years pitching this. And well, the truth is, it's hard to work together. And French, because apparently I brought my French life, so because I actually come from France, philosopher called Jean-Paul Sartre. Anyone know Jean-Paul Sartre? Yeah, I have a few notes, yeah. So he's the one famous for saying, l'enfer, c'est les autres, hell is the other. Yes, but enough of French philosophy. I have found a perfect internet meme that illustrates this. I present you. Wait, so has anyone seen this kind of thing before? Okay, I got a couple of hands. I've changed some of the things were so offensive. I have to change them, so it's the kind of edited version of it. So on the diagonal is how we perceive ourselves, and elsewhere is how other people perceive us. And so on the diagonal is great. I mean, yeah, do I need to comment? Yeah, I think our devs really think that they're top scientists and oh my God, we love Steve Jobs. It's like it used to be in every single design presentation and our PMs, they think they rule the world. But as designers, yes, my designers, they complain, they just call because they need to add a lick of paint or just edit some snags in an interface. But we're not keen to our developers. We think sometimes they lack any kind of human, basic kind of emotional sense. And our PMs, I mean, sometimes they treat them as factory lines. But what does a PM do anyway? Yes, I wonder. And for designers, they have this tendency of breaking a perfect design. So are we doomed to just hate each other? And maybe actually the solutions come from AI, because I'm not sure if you've seen recently, all you can hear about on social media is anyone, it was the past, and now we're all gonna merge happily. And management, what they hear, especially because of this kind of pressure, of inflation, cost cuttings, reorgs. What they start to miss here from all this is maybe that's the future. You take, one arm of a designer, one leg of a developer, the body of a PM. And this is slightly terrifying. I don't know if anyone seen The Substance? Yeah, the movie with the, yeah, be careful, right, what we wish for. And just as a disclaimer, I am not a denier of AI because I actually act as the UK AI officer for my company. I do use a lot of Gen AI tools in my private life. Even I like to write out small little things. So actually, Bruce could have maybe told a story where I do crochet because that's for real. And I did actually end up design and code a little tool for people to plan their blankets because, okay, anyway, if anyone's interested in crochet, you can come to me and we can talk about it. And design the blanket before committing in crocheting the whole thing, which takes $100. And I got great feedback on Etsy because it's part of bundle of things I sell. So I can say I'm part of the people who actually make money out of vibe-coded tools. But there are three things that as experts, our role is to have informed opinion based on our context. And obviously, this is just like a static tool because I didn't want to host any personal data or anything. So it's basically hosted on GitHub pages because I will just not vibe code my way out of like in the financial system. That would be completely reckless. And new and shiny is not a value in itself. And again, we have to be very careful about the narrative we're even selling inside our organization or on LinkedIn because it can really backfire. This being said, the three topics I'd like to bring to you today are the following. Who should code, who should talk business, and who should design? And actually, spoiler alert, of course, devs should code, business take care of the, PMs take care of the business, and designer design. But behind all this AI noise, if we take a step back, there's really interesting things we can do in the community. And again, because of the AI hype, we talk about maybe more like vibe coding, vibe designing these days, but even in large mature organizations, there's lots of interesting things we can do. So what I'll share today is how we've been approaching this at my company. Again, I'm a head of design, so this is more, I'm bringing more my design angle here, but this is something we tried to experiment with our devs and our PMs. And the end goal is kind of how we can go and be a bit more complement, kind of make this living and this co-working, existing together a bit less about finger pointing and fights. First one, who should code? So I think that sometimes we get fixated on not the good questions. And from my experience and what I've seen again for the last 15 years, a better question to ask is actually how can we work on code together? Because code at the end is what gets shipped, it's what ends up in front of the clients and our users. And everything before that is completely an artifact, something that will be produced and then documented, hopefully. But it's irrelevant at the end of the day if you make a perfect Figma design and what gets developed and shipped is completely full of UI misalignment. So how can we work together? Because the reality and things I've heard is, have you looked at my specs, says the designers to the dev. Okay, says the PM to the designer. We'll prioritize that much, much later, and you'll never see the light of the backlog. And this is a real quote that I translated because I was like, wow. From a PM about the devs, he told me once, honestly, given the quote I just received for what I think is just a label change in a dropdown, he wasn't convinced. And it's true, as I said, we spend so much time translating ourselves in those different tools, and by the way, all of them are selling AI features, that it is very time consuming. And so a kind of more complete question is actually, how can we spend less time translating artifacts when we don't need to, and work on code together? Again, a couple of things we tried, and I think are more useful, I'd say, to, for example, vibe coding away into the financial markets. So the first thing is actually using the same tool. What you see here is basically how we manage the team. This is the design team operation in my company, which is for any topic. For example, if someone went to a conference and want to share, they will just open a ticket on GitHub, on our GitHub, and we track our team rituals, decision in GitHub. It was actually a designer who made first this suggestion, and he was kind of more friendly towards dev tools. And although it can be a bit frightening for a designer who's never used or seen GitHub before, everyone is, just using it naturally now. And it doesn't take much time or effort to then convert them to actually making tickets in actually a real code repo. This one is actually, it's a bit small, but it's the thing we use to maintain our design system, the requests, the backlog, the bugs, new requests, etc. And I don't know if anyone has done some coaching here, but to me, it's kind of expanding this notion. So I don't know if you're familiar with this kind of, yes, some people, yes. It is true for designers, the first comfort zone is Figma, but it doesn't take much to then bring them into the browser when we try to inspect why there's some kind of UI inconsistency. And then because you put them, the team rituals in GitHub, then they can open UI reviews and tickets, which is, instead of doing that into any design tool, that's how we operate today. So this is just a screenshot of, I can't remember which project. Again, it's a bit small here, but what's interesting here is instead of saying, hey, there's a cap here or whatever, the designer just use the classes of a design system because we can just train people It doesn't require AI so far. Actually, you can learn faster. But yeah, so again, if you just, instead of saying, hey, there's a gap here, we can talk about margin or padding. And the interesting thing, again, if you've done coaching before, is this, that you don't stop here. You can then continue to expand. And so now everyone in the team does UI reviews in tickets. And some started to do UI reviews in PR, pull request. Yes, sorry, I forgot to translate this one. And project people, some of them are also pretty familiar. So basically, sometimes they also ask some changes in tickets. And for example, when they want to make translation changes, they do it directly as well in PRs, in the JSON. And again, as the AI officer, I need to have an informed opinion. I think really here the danger is when you jump too fast in the learning curve. And yes, it'll be fun to give, Cloud CLI to all the designers, but I'd rather much them spending time understanding the design system, the classes, to do good UI reviews directly in the code repo than trying to do some throwaway prototyping. And as I said, as expert, I think we really need also to be clear on our judgments because very often I can, for example, really do a good review on something that my designership. I cannot tell if my business people's business plan makes sense or not. And I cannot tell if something's been correctly deployed. So again, I'm not an AI denier, right? So AI is great, but how we've been using in the team, again, being quite measured about it, is more using that as a technical coach. What you see on screen here is our internal code pen. That's that, where you can basically build small UI snippet. I mean, some people go and just build the whole thing in there. It's completely static, but it's great to be showing to our project people, even users, piece of UI before we go on and do the whole dev and connect backend and everything. And so what you see here is actually a screenshot of a real piece of UI, and the designer was trying to understand why there was a layout shift. And yeah, with Copilot, what's great is basically we can even more speak the same language. So on this first question, who should code? I think a better question to ask is how to think this question is more how can we go and work on the code together? Because it is true, and don't get me wrong, we still do the traditional design methods, right? We still sometimes do research, ideation, prototyping, user testing, all this. But not everything needs to happen in a design tool. And same with business people. Actually, I have some example later on in this talk. When we don't need necessarily to spend time on those artifacts, we don't. And to do that, well, I think the first step is obviously to bring this kind of common grounding, which is sharing the tools. And thinking about expanding the comfort zone gradually, I think we kind of joke in the team that if we want to scare a developer, we just say, hey, do you want to give me access to your repo? And they start to sweat. We're a bit mean sometimes. But yeah, but obviously in my team, actually, I have a few people who can be considered as UX engineers because now they can even code a bit of React. And they've, let's say, expanded those safely done enough to be trusted as well for the team. But again, the first step is, I think, UI reviews in the browser. And as I said, AI is fabulous, especially as a technical coach. I'm going to now move to the second topic I want to bring to you guys today, which is who should talk business? And again, a few years ago, I don't know if you remember, everyone was like, should designers do business? Should designers do MBA? And I don't know if it was the same with people in engineering. But again, here I think it's not the right question. A better question to ask is, how can we share the same priorities? Because here again, as the French philosopher has said, I've heard many things over the course of my career, such as, but what do you want exactly? So usually that's someone very frustrated, a designer or a dev, towards, I see people nodding, the PMs. Oh, I'm not here for that. Me, I do design. Because someone asked them to do something, I don't know, a leaflet or something like that. And I heard this joke going around in product conferences that a designer is just a PM who know how to use Figma. I wasn't aware of this joke, so but apparently it's a thing. And yeah, it's very easy to get entrenched in our own corners. And well, if you think about it, originally it's so simple. If you have one client and you're the CEO of yourself, it's easy, you fully align with yourself. But obviously, if your company starts to be successful, you start to add more verticals and people need support. And then sometimes you do some matricial organization to align all of this between countries and everything. But yeah, that's how we start to see silos coming up. And it's, I think, really, I mean, that's a human nature. We like our peers, and it's just more comfortable to stay, arguing all day long about corner radius in my team than go and talk to people from support or sales. And so a better question and more expanding question is actually how can we reduce this kind of silo mindset, which is actually natural when companies expand, and do a bit less finger pointing and share the same priorities. Again, here's a few things we've done over the years to try to deal with that. And again, the first step is not as grandiose, I'd say. It can seem a bit dull, but it's just basically to align the same discovery ducks. Usually, business people, PMs, they work in Notion, PowerPoint, or Word. Designers, they love having all the scoping documents in Figma and FigJam, and developers, generated doc online. And this is great, but how can we be aligned if, the starting point is not aligned? And over the years, we started to align on, some people might recognize this lean canvas. Actually, no matter which methodology or which tool you use, and I have to say, every time we didn't have one and we facilitate workshops, it was very interesting. If you pull everyone in a room, you think everyone is aligned, but actually you realize they're not. So the first step for us on any project is to actually do this, make sure everyone is aligned before we even start about, staffing on what we're gonna do. The second thing we've done, and I think it's very true for us, but also it's something that we ask more and more, even on engineering team, to have a view on, is actually having strict engagement rules and tiering. I'm just going to explain a bit more and then come back to this. So if you work with designers or you study design, you may probably know the design process, the double diamond, if that means to anything to anyone. But essentially, it's like you have a need, you do some user research, scoping, discovery, then you do your wireframing, information hierarchy layout, prototyping, high fidelity testing, iterating all this, and then specification. This is great when you have time and when it's a priority for the business, because sometimes, let's just face it, we don't have time. And so instead of trying to do some kind of design theater, we're quite open, which is okay. We're not going to work on the experience because there's no time, but we'll do a review at the end. So at least we'll make sure that the design system is correctly used. There's basic things that date formatting, these kind of things. And what's interesting is when you tell people they don't deserve a designer, they're not happy to be said no. So over the years, we even introduced something. So funny enough, we call it design challenge in the team, or devs tend to call it hackathon, and our business people tend to call it war room. It's the same idea, different vocabulary, that we're going to condense a specific phase because we really want to invest on this, but it's going to be time boxed and compressed. So 3 names for that. As I was saying, for development people, instead of saying yes to any kind of features that business is asking, we also ask them to think about the strategy of the organization, the foundation. Is there something we should reuse, or we should first say no? And this has really changed compared even 10 years ago, where basically we were just executing. Business says something, we do it, and then we hire more people to do it. And now, whether it's for our engineering team or even for our design team, we are really asked to process the request and challenge it. And so, yes, to do that, you have to define clear engagement rules. So how are we going to do for each ways of doing, here, the design? So who should talk business? Well, here again, I think the real question is, how can we rather share the same business priorities and maybe have a bit less silo mindset, which again, I think is very natural, especially in big organization, and a bit less finger pointing, which again is super natural. I like to say this joke because we're here in the UK, but my team is half in the UK and half in France. And in the UK, very often, and okay, I don't want to be political here, but they say, no, Paris has said that. I was like, who's Paris? You know, like there's people in Paris. I was like, there's a lot of people. Like, who in Paris said that? Because obviously, me going back and forth, I don't see the same way. And yeah, so just to say, it's just so natural, and we have this thing everywhere. So we just should acknowledge it. But how to fight that is, well, first have again common grounds. I was talking about tooling before, but now it's more common ground on even what we should be doing, and defining clear engagement rules and tiering. I forgot to mention that for this, it's really super important that everyone in the team, including our juniors, are able to understand this, because this is how they know they're being kidnapped on projects. And I've been telling them, don't worry, anyone in the team has a story where they suddenly one day realized they were working on something they were not supposed to work on, because, the project just add them yet one more thing, and that one more thing was, if they ask me, not in our priority. All right, how am I doing with time? Oh, yeah, good. All right, the last part is who should design? And there's a lot of nervousness again here, especially with, Cloud Design, Stitch, Google Stitch, and and Figma, Make, Figma AI. But again, a better way of thinking this question is going back to the roots, and more asking the question, how can we improve the user or the customer experience together? Because here again, over the course of my career, I heard things like that. You're just a bottleneck. Give me access to InVision, Figma, Adobe XD, whatever the design tool is. And you want to introduce Sphere to a designer, you start, got a minute? It's just a tiny tweak. And designers' best answer for everything is, it depends. Which I think drives people crazy when I start by it depends, but really it depends, right? And let me come back to the French philosophy part, because again, I didn't fully explain this notion of hell being the other. In the book, when he, I think, originally wrote it, it's not to say that we don't like the others. It's basically, I'm not sure if I'm going to butcher that, but it's the idea that the gaze of others box us into boxes and kind of limits of freedom, and maybe we don't agree with kind of being boxed into that. What's the link with the tools? I think tools sometimes do the same. And because tools have good marketing budget, I suppose. I don't know why. There's a moment in time where suddenly we started thinking that you only do design in Sketch, InVision, Figma, that only developers can use GitHub. And it's a bit, like thinking, you have access to Word, I'm going to write Lord of the Rings. So again, I'm sorry for bringing so much philosophy. It was not planned, but he started. I think a lot of this kind of creates unnecessary frustrations in teams, and the better way of, and I know if you want to upset me, you just say, give me Figma, I'll do it myself, and I'll be like, can you start with design system, understanding all this, it's not because you're going to have Figma that suddenly you're going to be a designer, and so, but anyway, so all this is to say, how can we actually rethink what design means and what is design's contribution so we can improve the customer experience altogether? Again, many things we tried over the year, and some, for the sake of time, I'm only going to share a couple. And I don't know how groundbreaking is going to be the first one, because again, for me, it's kind of basic, is part of a design process starts outside of design tool. Excel. We have basically a huge phase of a scoping process in Excel, because Excel, and again, especially because we work in the financial industry, we deal with lots of data. And Excel is just great to manage data in general. And you can even use that as a design deliverable, because you're going to sign off on, for example, all the data you think that we're going to have to show in the interface. Then you're going to start looking at, okay, do we actually have the API for those data? Where is it? How's the contract? So there's a lot of things can be done staying in Excel. And I'm very glad because for this talk, I managed to find a real example for my company that I am able to show, which is actually sometimes we even sign off Excel prototypes to go to dev. I see some people like in disbelief or smiling. Because if you have good foundation, I came here, I think 3 years ago, to talk about design system. If you have good foundations, a good design system, it's very easy for us to translate this. And again, if there's no need to do any kind of scoping research, if the business talks to client and they know and they've been trained in our methodology, we kind of trust them. But if they need support, obviously we're here. There's sometimes, it's just quick and easy. And shall I say, it's not just designers who can think visually. There's other people too. They can think visually too. They deserve to think visually. So instead of grinding in Figma, and honestly, doing this in Figma will take so much time. Some of designers, and again, everyone coming in the team is like, what? You're so I don't know what they think when they come in the team and they see that, but because it works, that's how they what they're doing. So this was, I think, an Excel done by someone from the business, but we also have our engineers doing this because sometimes it's just quicker to collaborate. I'm sure you're a bit surprised that you come to a conference to hear that Excel is a great design tool. But whatever works, and especially whatever is shared between people, again, thinking, how can we work better together? This one, again, okay, not someone had fun doing this. It's fine. As long as you express your idea, we will take it as input. If it's not good, then obviously we do a kind of advisory here. But they wanted to start introducing a feature. And again, especially if you work on kind of evolution requests, this is great. And so, for example, here we are on a, how can I explain this? It's a financial tool to trace your products on the market. If you have, so again, it's more for B2B, but if you have life insurance funds, maybe they would buy this kind of product, or wealth managers. And so we wanted to implement a scheduling feature. And at the end, we did look at the flow and everything, but at the end it was looking pretty, and again, it's not that look, let me show you what was the end result. So that's the real product. It's very compact, as you can see, because here it's basically someone can do multiple pricing at the same time with lots of different parameters. And we have this kind of scheduler. And if we compare with the Excel file, it's not the same disposition because we have guidelines. It's not the same, we've documented all this. I mean, this is very vanilla for us. And that brings me to the final piece of my presentation in this part, is actually how to rethink even design's contribution. I think historically, and maybe that's how designers see the job in a lot of companies, we think of designer creating a screen and maybe a set of screens and maybe a set of applications. But when you work at scale in large, mature organizations like mine, we kind of go beyond and try to think more like designers are urban planners. So instead of doing one single house, we actually have to think about a lot of other things, such as the platform guidelines. Because even if you think about date formatting, if it's different from one service to another, people are going to be completely lost. I see people nodding, thank you. And sometimes we also have to be a bit... how to say that, have skin in the game, which is sometimes the different services in our platform want to develop the same feature, but that will add confusion for clients. So we have to be kind of neutral, the Swiss, and try to say, okay, it makes more sense to have this feature there, and so kind of also challenge them a little bit, or challenge even if the project is an MVP or not. And over the years, and again, if you invest really in your design system, I mean, I'm not doing a design system talk, but really, if you invest in a design system over the years, especially if you work in the company with a lot of similar use cases, you start to see a lot of recurring patterns, not just buttons, but, and actually that's my next example, but for example, trading price. What's a tradable price? What's an indicative price? What is a price that will be timed out? We don't want to reinvent the wheel every time, so we just document that in the design system. And I actually ask a designer and say, please don't force this, but in your next project, and we were designing this new product for one of our business line, can you please note down all the pattern you need in your interface? And can you please also do a bit of benchmark and try to see how much of this you can reuse? And this is a study, again, so it's a bit small, but imagine an operation blotter. Filtering tables. We've designed this 1,000 times. Obviously, we still need the view of the expert to make sure that it's a relevant use, because also sometimes we have misusage of our patterns. But that was great because basically he was able to demonstrate that 80% of the design workload can be saved and reinvested because we have designed it already somewhere else in the platform. And the good thing is, those somewhere else is already in production, people are using it, so we know that they work. And when I do this presentation more internally, I'm very careful to say it doesn't mean that we're going to go 80% faster. Careful, as I said, always about the narrative. But that means we can focus where we want to focus, because otherwise we'll still have to work, but we will probably not have the time to really focus on things that may be strategic for the project. Whereas here, everything that is vanilla, it's kind of low touch design, and then we can really focus when needs be. So, as a final wrap up, I would say that behind all the craziness and things we hear, especially on LinkedIn, I suppose, there's better, and again, if AI is used on excuse to kind of more introduce this way of working together, great. But I feel sometimes it's not really seen like that. I was in a conference recently where someone said, it's very funny because at my company, we gave AI to everyone. And the first thing everyone tried to do is replace other people's job, right? Which also is a testimony of they don't understand what other people do. So, and as I said, we have to be careful about narrative here. So at the end of the day, instead of like trying to fight about, who codes, who does what, who thinks, who builds, there's better conversation and more mature conversation to have, which is code, how we can, go and code faster together, start working. So maybe as a takeaway for people in the room who are developers, how about, asking your designer if they would be game on doing design reviews in the browser and create tickets for you on your code repo without obviously giving them access to, although we do it, but again, I think it's more valuable to start with that. And expand the comfort zone gradually. And now, especially with AI, it's easier as well for people to kind of self-service themselves. I haven't talked about it, but as I said, we have some designers in the team who are now more like design engineers. So they've actually been given access to the code repo, and with GitHub Copilot for them, it's actually easier to find where are the classes, because before it's like impossible to scroll. And so now they use that more to, again, if we want to change the margin or padding, we can do it directly, and then the dev can review it. It's not gonna mess up with any, backend system connection or whatever. Then on the business side, how can we share the same priorities? Again, lots to be done here, but first it's just to align the discovery doc and also train everyone to engage, to know the rules of engagement and tiering. And I have to say, actually, for the war room / hackathon / design system, what's very strange is like now with some of our projects that are very mature, which means it's the same people, we've been working with them for several years, and so they know exactly what we need as input. So for example, they will come in with some specification. Instead of talking about solution, they will write hypothesis, which then my designers are like, oh, finally, someone who can talk about hypothesis and not solution. We are sometimes now able to do this kind of condensed war room format with them. So it's not just maturity, it's once you have this alignment, and very important that this is discussed with the project and agreed with the project as things you can do. And finally, about design, well, again, instead of thinking one screen, how can we do even the design process outside of design tool and more use designers as urban planners? So at the end of the day, again, who thinks, who builds? Are we going to just merge into one? I am really not convinced if you look at any AI companies that haven't necessarily merged everyone into one role either. But anyway, even if this happens, I think a more mature conversation to have is actually how can we start kind of co-living together and sharing those tools, because it is true that even with AI, these things are becoming more accessible for others. And In a sense, I think this is generally good. I mean, I'm tend to be a positive person in life, but it really allows us to think staffing on projects in a more human way. Again, referring my French philosopher here, instead of thinking box, okay, designers do this task, you can start thinking about more people. And I know that actually a lot of AI companies think like that. It's like, okay, what do we need to be done? And when they look at candidates, it's like, okay, what can they do? Instead of predefining rules and trying to box humans in those rules. Okay, I'll stop here with the philosophy. But yeah, I think it's a genuinely more interesting way to build teams. And it's like when we hire, we look at the existing skill set and we try to say, okay, what we're missing? And we will try to find the person who brings something that we're missing today instead of just having a job desk. So I did account for questions. So I don't know if we can do questions, but if not, you have a few minutes to visit a Medium blog written by the team where we share things that we find interesting. I can share with you that the rules of the Medium is it should not be self-pitching. It should not be a portfolio piece. It should be something generally that the community would find interesting. So we try to have interesting things to share, whether it's about our design system, story, AI, or data visualization, or even bringing value, bringing the business mindset into design. So yeah, here's the link. And thank you very much. Merci.